347-326-9626. We're going to do the news right now. I do see Hunter in the queue. We're going to get right to you. And we understand there may even be a vote that was taken on that federal bill. We're going to get an immediate update real time. But right after this.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Keys.
With 46 minutes left in the show, I turn it over to Rick Thompson with the news.
Hello, everybody. I am Rick Thompson. It's the news. It's May 29th, 2014. A majority of Michigan voters oppose legalizing marijuana for recreational use, according to a new Detroit News WDIV-TV poll. The poll of 600 likely voters was conducted May 20 through 22nd by the Glengarriff Group of Chicago. It has a margin of error of plus or minus 4 percentage points. And in the poll, 52.1% of Michigan voters opposed legalizing small amounts of marijuana for recreational use, while 41.8% support it. The poll found a sharp difference in attitudes on marijuana legalization among voters under and over the age of 40. The strongest support was found among the age group 18 to 29, with almost 60%, and among those 65 and older, about 28% supported the idea. Earlier this month, a national Fairleigh Dickinson University Public Mind poll found that 50% of Americans favor legalizing marijuana for recreational use, and in 2012, an Epic MRA poll indicated 65% of Michiganians believed personal use of marijuana should be treated as a civil infraction, the equivalent of a traffic ticket. A bill that would provide order to California's modeled medical marijuana program cleared a major hurdle Friday when the state's Assembly's Appropriations Committee moved it forward for a full Assembly vote next week. The measure would create uniform rules to govern the state's multi-billion-dollar medical marijuana industry. Although California became the first state to legalize cannabis for medicinal use in 1996, the state has yet to establish a set of standards guiding the cultivation, production, and sale of marijuana. California currently leaves it up to local governments to decide how they want to implement the state's medical marijuana law. Bill AB 1894 would create a division within California Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control to regulate all medical marijuana-related entities throughout the state, from the farmers that cultivate to the storefronts that sell. The proposal would allow the agency to impose fees on marijuana businesses in order to raise revenue for the state. Local municipalities would also be allowed to impose additional taxes. For the fifth time in 7 years, the State Assembly of New York passed a bill legalizing medical marijuana. They backed a measure that would far surpass a program implemented by Governor Andrew Cuomo earlier this year. But with less than 4 weeks left in the legislative session, the prospects for passage in the state Senate remained uncertain. Does this sound like a familiar story, guys? The bill allowed the possession and use of up to 2.5 ounces of marijuana by seriously ill patients who doctors, physicians' assistants, or nurse practitioners has certified. Permits organizations to establish dispensaries, and also enacting any bill on medical marijuana may be very difficult. The Assembly, where Democrats have a majority, have passed such bills even as far back as 2007, but Republicans in the Senate have been cold to the concept. This year, they've supported as many This year, they have the support of as many as 40 senators, including several Republicans. But still, for the bill to be brought to a vote in the Senate, the leader of the Republicans would need to allow it. Similar to Michigan, where there's a standoff. Our Senator Skelos, he's considerably more circumspect about medical marijuana's chances on Tuesday, saying no decision had been made on a vote. Now, 21 citizens of the Dominican Republic have been charged with conspiring to impersonate United States law enforcement officers. They've been charged with extortion and charged with wire fraud. Now, authorities in the Dominican Republic located and arrested 17 of the defendants, who are now awaiting extradition. The defendants targeted individuals who they believed had illicitly purchased prescription pharmaceuticals through call centers in the Dominican Republic. As part of the defendant's scheme, a member of the conspiracy would then call a victim in the United States and identify him or herself as a DEA agent. The victim then is told that they are under investigation for illegally purchasing prescription drugs, and the only way to avoid arrest is to pay a fine or some other fee to the DEA. In total, the defendants and others who participated in the scheme demanded at least $3.5 million and received at least $880,000 in payments from victims in the United States. So, if the DEA is not at your door, Don't believe it when they call you on the phone. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the news. I'm interested to hear what Hunter Holloman has to say. We were just watching the U.S. House of Representatives live on the computer and saw the vote. I won't take Hunter's thunder away from him. I'll let him deliver the news. Thanks for listening. It's Rick Thompson. Have a great night.
Thank you very much, Rick. With that being said, we're going to bring immediately into the comfort of Planet Green Trees. Hunter, welcome to the show. I know you've been watching attentively this activity taking place, debating and a vote potentially. What can you tell us, Hunter Holloman?
Well, thank you, Mike, for having me on, and thanks to Rick and Jamie for also making sure I could make it. We were actually expecting the debate and the vote to happen late last night, and it ended up getting pushed out till today, and then it was supposed to happen at 6:30, and the debate finally just happened just about 9 o'clock tonight. It was actually in from my point of view, I am a little bit biased, but I thought that Representative Rohrabacher, who's a Republican from California, who's one of the lead sponsors, and has actually introduced this bill for some consecutive years, I thought that he spoke extremely passionately. I thought that the other co-sponsors really hit some excellent points. The opposition, for the most part, really just said a few of the same oppositional points that they make all the time, that, this is just a stepping stone to greater legalization of cannabis, and that, there's no tested evidence that medical cannabis is actually effective in treating certain things. And, they brought in, the opposition brought in their doctor. He's a congressman from Louisiana. Dana Rohrabacher was very good to bring in one of our own medical professionals from the medical cannabis side, who really spoke very eloquently. And again, I might be a little biased, but I think that this was one of the hardiest debates we've had in medical cannabis on the floor of the House. And although it wasn't totally one-sided in our favor, it certainly seemed that we had the upper hand coming out of it. Now, whether or not that's going to translate to passing the bill is going to be another thing. But one thing that's really important to note is that there has never been a piece of legislation that's been voted on in the House that has ever had more than 195 yes votes. And in fact, we just set that 195 high water mark about 3 weeks ago on it was a Veterans Administration appropriations amendment that would have allowed doctors and VAs to actually write recommendations for veterans. That vote got, surprisingly, 195 ayes, which is I especially find interesting, because we're sitting in the midst of the least effective Congress we've ever had, and on top of that, they are very, very conservative. And the previous high watermark that we had for votes on a medical cannabis bill had been 165, and that was 2007 when this same CJS amendment was voted on, introduced by Rohrabacher as well. So we made some incredible strides just in the last 7 years, coming from 165 positive votes in the House to 195 just a few weeks ago. And we even have reason to believe right now, again, this vote is going to happen most likely tomorrow midday, but our counts for solid aye votes is about 205, and there's about 40 targets that the drug policy community has been working on, really trying to persuade. We've had I think everyone, DPA, Open Society, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, we've all really been coordinating on getting our grassroots members and supporters to come out and try and contact their representatives in favor of this. So Tomorrow, no matter what the outcome, whether we win or lose, we really expect it to be a win-win situation. Is more than likely we'll get at least 205 votes, which is more than the previous high water mark we just set 3 weeks ago. So this is a very exciting time, especially in this very conservative Congress. We're hoping to see possibly even up to 210, and it would take, I believe, 218 aye votes to actually pass. So that's still in the realm of possibility here. But again, it is a win-win situation, and we just had some incredible support from legislators on this bill. It was a bipartisan bill this year. We actually had 12 co-sponsors, 6 Republican and 6 Democrat, so it shows a real lot of cooperation from both sides of the aisle. And I think everyone in drug policy should be patting themselves on the back for all the work we've done to get this far.
And when you say win-win, of course, you mean that just the exposure, the number of votes, because it's a building block. Every little step forward is more meaningful the next time an important issue comes up, and that's the suggestion. And the other win is that it may pass. It actually may have an impact on the spending. We're talking, of course, with Hunter Holloman. He's the National Field Coordinator for the Pro-Medical Cannabis Organization, Americans for Safe Access. And we're talking about this debate and a vote, which you said may be as early as tomorrow. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so. It doesn't look like it's going to happen tonight. It looks like most of everything they had on the agenda got pushed back about 2 hours. So I would expect you'd see the vote. You could probably watch it on C-SPAN tomorrow in between 10 and noon Eastern.
It's interesting, and I didn't do this when I brought you on the show, and I just want to kind of lay some foundation after the fact. But this specific bill that we're talking about, it's a proposed amendment to a spending bill. So that's tasty to legislators, like anti-spending, like limitations on spending is something, cut spending, right? That is, just by its definition, the label on it is seemingly inviting to some political, philosophies. But this bill would, in essence, not allow money to be spent by the federal government with these agencies that have been the agencies that have been rating states that have passed medical marijuana laws. And I'm curious, if you can, what are the basic fundamental arguments by the opposition? Because clearly, this issue appeals to the states' rights, which is a traditionally conservative issue. But it goes beyond that. But what are the traditional philosophical oppositional positions? And do you sense that they come from political philosophy or economic, inspiration, or funding by organizations?
That's a tough question. Most of the arguments we heard from opponents tonight were, again, those that have worked in the medical cannabis community and advocacy. They hear all the time. They definitely brought up the slippery slope argument that medical is just a means to get a foot in the door for recreational or tax and regulate. They quoted the DEA and ANIDA documents on that, so of course they're reading their own people's statements. There was the doctor from Louisiana, Representative Fleming, who spoke to the effect of cannabis being an extremely addictive drug and that it had absolutely no medical efficacy. Of course, he based this on NIDA's research, and of course, NIDA being National Institute of Drug Abuse, that is their mandate, is to study drug abuse, not drug therapeutic potential. There didn't seem to be too much absolute hysteria about medicine getting into the hands of children. There was a few references to increased emergency room visits in Colorado since recreational had come through. And the one thing they didn't really touch on as much, which is really becoming more of a sounding point for the opposition, is the potential for diversion of legally produced medicine in a state where it is legal to a state where it isn't. And for the most part, I feel like a lot of these arguments are both economically and politically driven. They come from this history of opinion or law based on private interests. For instance, the hemp industry in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, basically being, you could say, squashed by Hearst and the Anslinger propaganda that went along with that. That also had a lot of racial motivation, racial, political, and economic motivation. So it's taken a long time to undo a lot of this bias and misinformation that we're finally getting to the point now where Fox News is doing polls where 85% of Americans support medical cannabis, and this is from a Fox News poll. And we're finally getting to the point now also where I think our elected representatives from both sides of the aisle are starting to realize that this isn't an issue that they're going to lose an election over. With 85% of your constituents being in favor of it, you're not going to lose an election for coming out in favor of medical cannabis. There's plenty of Tea Party and Republican and Libertarian and Socialist and Democratic elected officials out there who are in support. And I think it's just taken a very long time for us to get to this point where we can have almost a rational debate on the House floor about the possibility of medical cannabis. And Representative Rohrabacher, being a Republican, this was one of the first points that he made, and of course this being an appropriations bill having to do with spending, was that this is a states' rights bill, and that this is a 10th Amendment issue, and it's something that all political philosophies should be embracing and not feel that they have to embrace the crazy propaganda of their predecessors.
Yeah, we just had Mark Brewer on, who's was the Democratic chairman in Michigan, and and I know that this isn't his hot topic issue. I think he's been involved in a lot of different political issues, but medical marijuana and cannabis reform is not as But I sense that he viewed the political landscape on this issue as being much more traditionally politically divided, and I feel like this discussion that your observation of this is that it is beyond that now. I mean, it's transcended a lot of issues. I mean, a lot of like cultural, economic, and political, and what would normally be parties or factions that would never agree on a political issue are finding themselves together on this issue, either cannabis reform or especially the states' rights issue of medical marijuana and the right to do that. Do you agree with that? I mean, do you think it's expanded past that, or it transcends the traditional political boundaries?
I wouldn't go so far as to say that the right has included it in their party platform quite yet, or even that all of the left has embraced it. But I do think those lines have blurred quite a bit. We very recently had a Republican representative from Virginia, another very conservative state, he introduced a rescheduling bill for cannabis, actually, to reschedule from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. Now, obviously, that's not an ideal transition. We would rather see it in Schedules 3 or 4 or descheduled completely. But, it does show that there are these incredibly conservative red states that are changing their perception, and their public officials are realizing that this is what their constituents want. One of the folks that came up in support of this amendment was actually a Republican from Georgia, who quite frankly stated, he's like, Georgia almost passed a medical cannabis bill this last year, and I don't want to be put in a situation next year when they do pass it that the federal government's going to come in and try and stop a state-sponsored program. So I think that people are really starting to get it, and it's finally trickling its way up into the political leadership. You see, Alabama now has a CBD bill. Wisconsin has a CBD bill. Utah has a CBD bill. We're really close to having 30 medical cannabis bills enacted in various states. Now, that's if you include all the CBD bills, and if you possibly include Minnesota, which they just signed, the governor just signed the bill, I believe, today or yesterday, where they don't have any access to flowers. It's just an extract bill. So there's, again, you're seeing, we're now at the point where we're at 30 states. Now, is that critical mass? Is that enough to, show to Congress that this is the will of the people and this is the will of their constituents? Maybe. I certainly like to think so. But at the very least, it shows that, we have friends on both sides of the aisle, and it's not just a thing that's a phenomenon that's localized on the West Coast or in New England that is totally past medical cannabis, or in Illinois and Chicago and Michigan. This is a phenomenon that's happening across the nation. We see southern states doing it, all of New England, all the Southwest, all the West, and we're starting to see Nevada and of course Michigan. You guys have been such a stalwart kind of in between. I know you guys are jokingly referred to as the third coast at times, and I think that's apt because you're certainly ahead of the curve for your geographic region.
Thank you for saying so. We like the third coast. It's a good designation. Don't we, Jamie?
I guess it depends. I'm trying to I'd like to believe that there's a faction of the Republican Party that is much more open-minded than I think of, like a Ron Paul or I don't know, Rand and the other. But I don't see like a Bonner or the guy from Kentucky, whatever his name is. I don't see like them. So it is an issue, but I think the opposition to it in those parties, it's more of that. I don't want to, like a conservative, like pro-law enforcement. Seemingly like the rights of citizens are not on the agenda of their legislation, and most of their strong issues really are moral issues, and the things that are not really libertarian based. That are not about freedoms or that really are in fact governmental overreach into your personal business, into your bedroom, and the choices that you make, which I think is really that's the reform movement. That's the basis of I think what is the appeal to the individuals who might be on the fence. At that level, Chad,
they're impeding the right to pursue happiness.
Right, and it's a government intrusion. It's government more laws. It gets them into your home. It's a crime that gets them in your home, gets them taking your property, forfeiting, creating cases. It's failed policy. People are getting locked up. That's not a Republican libertarian view. It's not. So I don't know. But I hear you. I don't think that it's really there yet. I guess I was sounding a little more optimistic, but it is blurred. And today's debate, as you described it, is a win because the discussion has become so realistic and, if not now, soon, right? That's what it sounds like.
It's what we're hoping. I mean, I really, truly wish that we got more traction with, we actually have 2 bills in the House right now, H.R. 689, which is the State's Medical Marijuana Rights Act. I believe that's sponsored by Representative Blumenauer and I believe Rohrabacher and Farr as well, that would reschedule from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2 or 3. And I really do truly wish that legislation like that got more legs. It is unfortunate that, we kind of have to get what we can take and, obviously sliding an amendment into a CJS appropriations bill is kind of the backdoor way to do it. But, it is what it is. I think we're getting there. Even in Michigan, you can see 4271 is sponsored by a Republican, which is fantastic. I still think we're a few years off, though. I really do, and part of that is going to be what type of disposition we have in Congress after these upcoming midterms. Part of it's going to be, what the new presidential administration is going to look like in the next 4 years. What Congress decides to do. I mean, we've now seen Holder come out and make statements for the Obama administration saying, we're ready to work with Congress to try and reschedule this and resolve some of these federal conflicts. I would really, really like to see a little bit of stronger leadership from this administration. I have seen Holder and Obama claim that they don't have the power to unilaterally fix this, and in fact, that is not true. Either the Attorney General of the U.S. or the President by an executive order can reschedule or deschedule any drug in the CSA without Congress's implicit support, without them passing a bill, or without judicial oversight. So, I feel like there's a lot of pressure being put on Congress right now, and it's not the only way to get this done. ASA did recently, in the last 12 months, had our 11-year-old rescheduling petition against the DEA was refused by the Supreme Court. So we've seen, a lack of will from the judicial branch. We've seen now a very clear lack of leadership from the executive, it's putting a lot of pressure on Congress, and it's tough. It's tough. I wish that we were getting better judgments out of the Supreme Court on this. I wish the executive would actually stand up and fulfill some campaign promises. And I wish that the House had a better composition to act a little bit more favorably on some of this legislation, not just this type of CJS amendment that we're talking about, but on proper rescheduling bills.
What is the lobbying opposition up there at the federal level?
For the most part, it's interesting. You hear a lot of conspiracies about big pharma or big tobacco. These aren't really who we view our opponents in Capitol Hill. We quite frankly see a lot of the law enforcement lobby coming through, both from correctional officers as well as the various police chiefs, organizations, fraternal orders of police that have a very strong lobby and a lot of money to back that up. Of course, they have a very large industry to protect. Aren't
they in favor of states' rights? I mean, isn't those sheriff's department, it's like a national collection of police chiefs and sheriffs that are the last defender against the federal government should they come for our guns and try to take them from our dead cold hands or something like that? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
There's a faction out there, I would call them, that are they believe that they may want to have the right to regulate. They don't want the federal government telling them how to do it, right? I mean, that is a law enforcement concept. I mean, they don't want it, but they'd rather control it than let the federal government come in and just trump all over the 10th Amendment. That is a philosophy that resonates a little. Would you agree with that?
I would, but I don't think they're aware of their own hypocrisy at the same time. There's so much money. I mean, you mentioned asset forfeiture a little bit ago. Just the money that local law enforcement takes in every year from seizing alleged drug dealers' houses, bank accounts, cars, all their assets is incredible. It really is. And, it's not just medical cannabis or cannabis. It's, these prohibitive drug laws in general allow this to perpetuate. The law enforcement is actually on some levels, maybe implicitly, to go out and seize things fairly arbitrarily, and they can come up with whatever probable cause they want, it seems, in a lot of cases, and all that revenue just goes back into their department, or the majority of that revenue. So, yes, I think that, law enforcement is very protective about, invasions of privacy from the federal government and all that. But I think they also recognize that, medical cannabis is the beginning of an erosion of a lot of that ability to take in revenue through things like civil asset forfeiture.
Buttering of the bread.
Which is a whole nother issue altogether. I guess, though, I will say I had previously said that Big Pharma wasn't such a big lobby against us, not in the traditional sense that you would expect all these big, pharmaceutical companies to be ganging up, but Project SAM, which it's Representative Kennedy and Dr. Kevin Sabet out of Florida. These guys are maybe one of our more vocal opponents. They certainly seek the limelight, and in situations like Crossfire or any type of media debate, they seem to put themselves in the forefront as the leading advocates of marijuana and medical cannabis. And some of their funding is pharmaceutically motivated, but these guys are kind of jokers. I don't know if anyone's seen some of the things that Kevin Sabet uses as objections. It doesn't seem like much of it is motivated by science or based in science. A lot of it is just hysteria. Think about the children. So they would be our other major opponent in Capitol Hill and in most state houses too.
Do you think they're largely funded by pharmaceutical companies at this point?
I know that some degree of their funding comes from the pharmaceutical industry. I'm not sure what percentage of it is, and a lot of people just really consider them to be clowns. One of ACE's board members, Dr. Sunil Agarwal, actually has a great article out, which is basically, I think it's debunking the 5 arguments of Kevin Sabet. And Sunil is both a medical doctor at NYU. He's a professor. He's also a PhD as well, and certainly has the credentials to, make Dr. Sabet look foolish, and he really does. Just so much of the arguments that people come up with are so based in, like these old biased mindsets that the opponents are kind of running out of things to say, and I don't know if you've ever seen Patrick Kennedy talk. It's interesting that he can even string together a coherent sentence at times, much less speak eloquently about the abuse potential of cannabis. These guys are one of our main opposition as a lobby group, but I think they're being heard less and less, and I think that people are starting to understand that they're just jokers that are reiterating the same verbal diarrhea.
Very apt description.
Let me ask you this, and we only got about 10 minutes left, and I don't want to let you go, and it's getting kind of late. The hemp farm bill passed, and I kind of perceive it as a huge step off the starting line at a place where, the medical cannabis community has been standing a long time begging to take, the babies to please research something, give us something. It's there, the science is there. I mean, it goes on, and we all know the mantras behind that. And then all of a sudden, with the swift signature of a pen and probably some hemp paper somewhere, they passed this hemp farming bill allowing states who have state laws in place to begin research and even growing of hemp. How significant is that at an evolutionary scale, in your eyes, compared to where the cannabis reform or medical cannabis community is at? I mean, is this huge? Like I believe it is, in the sense that there's going to be a clear path to a industry that Americans can. A clear path for Americans to compete in an industry that supersedes $15 billion year in and year out on imports from China and Canada.
Yeah, I think it's. I agree with you. Although industrial hemp isn't really my area of expertise. The arguments for industrial hemp and tax and regulate and medical cannabis are all very different. But the original, the historic significance of all three are all rooted in the same, bad public policies, propaganda by Anslinger, racial discrimination. And so when you start to see, one part of the puzzle erode, like we're seeing with industrial hemp right now, it's, I certainly see it as a good omen. I think it's a great sign of the times. They back in the 30s and up through the 60s, they threw the baby out with the bathwater when it came to industrial hemp and cannabis being used recreationally, not realizing the economic potential for the industry there. So it's definitely a step in the right direction. I can't believe that the DEA really stuck their face in it by seizing the seeds that were coming to Kentucky. There was actually a big debate over an amendment earlier in the day just on that topic specifically, and it's also very telling of how the mindset of our big law enforcement federal agencies, DEA and DOJ, that despite this farm bill, despite states passing bills allowing research of industrial hemp, that they're still going to contradict the will of the people and the government and seize the seeds and, try and make a big scene about it. But yes, the short answer is that I do view the passing of the industrial hemp bill, and big thanks to Rep. Blumenauer again for getting that across as yet another stepping stone in kind of this process as we fight back against prohibition.
Very well said. So this is if this bill passes tomorrow, and we get that was it 218 votes, is that what's needed, or was it more than that?
Yes, sir, 218.
And that will then do what? What would be the next phase that would go to? It becomes law? If amendments through it, or does it have to go back and be voted on in the other chamber?
So if the amendment passes tomorrow, they're hoping to actually vote on the CJS bill on the House floor tomorrow as well. So this appropriations bill has already gone through committee. It's basically in this final step where if the House approves it, then they'll approve it. The same thing will probably come up on the Senate side in the next month or so. We don't really have a timetable for the Senate CJS appropriations bill. But if this were to pass the House, it could go to the Senate. And essentially the implications would be that the DOJ and Drug Enforcement Agency, which is housed under the DOJ, would have their funding cut for the next coming fiscal year for 2015 that would prohibit them from interfering in state medical programs. And that includes the CBD bills that were just passed. So that would include Alabama, Utah, all of the above. And although it wouldn't really truly call a ceasefire, it certainly again sets the tone that patients that are or patients or cultivators or operators or manufacturers that are working in states that are legal can have a little bit more security and not quite be looking over their shoulder as much as they are currently, even with these new Ogden guidelines. I know I certainly still feel the need to look over my shoulder every now and then, whether I'm doing something in compliance with state law or not. And so the DOJ right now claims that in compliance with the Ogden memo that they are in fact not prosecuting patients and raiding dispensaries that are acting in compliance with state law. Now, what they're saying and what they're doing are two totally separate things. In fact, ASA has been instrumental in bringing to light this case in eastern Washington, a very rural part of Washington state. The case is called the Kettle Falls Five, where basically this family that lives on a farm and, hunts on their own and grows their own food, they have a garden kitchen outside, is getting prosecuted by the federal government for having essentially 44 plants between 5 people. And if that isn't the perfect example of the federal government coming in and prosecuting patients, then I don't know what is. It's a perfect example of doing one thing or saying one thing and doing the other. And so passing this CJS appropriations bill for the upcoming fiscal year for 2015 would help prevent raids and prosecutions like that.
What's Washington's current limit on plants, Hunter? I know you said the Kettle Falls 5 had 44 plants. What are they allowed?
I believe, between the 5 of them, they were allowed 75, which I believe is 15 plants per patient.
So significant. They were significantly under that amount.
Yes, that is correct. Well, so Washington is very similar to Michigan in that they don't have the strongest state level regulations. for medical cannabis. They don't have a state-run dispensing system, and they don't have oversight on cultivation of communal gardens and such. There is a stipulation that community gardens or co-ops have a limit of 64 plants, I believe. So, but either way you look at it, 44 plants is still less than 75 plants or 64 plants. So they were clearly in compliance with state law when they were raided.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that.
All right. It's always fascinating, Hunter, and I appreciate you reporting all that. It's very important information. I know it's very helpful for people that are, fighting at the local level, state level, and it's good to hear that, any of these win-win situations that can be described, and the message is getting out, and we're seeing some progress. I know it inspires everyone to keep the fight up, gets them up the next day to keep on going. I appreciate all your hard work, and I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing with us.
Of course. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a great night. Look forward to talking to you soon.